Hi, everyone. So recently, I reached out to three of my customer experience professional colleagues and friends and asked them to provide quotes for an article about the lessons that we learned in customer experience from the year of 2020. One of those people was Heather Mitchell, lead PSP strategy and operations at Novartis. Here's what she had to say.
2020 has taken Vuca, meaning volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity to heart. COVID and the uncertainty it's generated has amplified the need for us to anticipate what our customers need and to communicate clearly about what we're doing for them. This year has been an opportunity to collaborate more closely with customers about what really matters to them. And when things go sideways, prompt accountability, humility, and clarity on the plan to rectify the situation go a long way to retain or reestablish confidence. You've done it right when customers remember better what you did to rectify the situation, more so than the error itself.
We're so happy to have you here, Heather, and we're so happy that you were able to contribute your thoughts to the blog that we talked about lessons from 2020. And, one of the things that's really fun about what we do is you often are part of our community that joins the webinars that we do almost every Friday, not every single Friday, but almost. And it's really fun to develop relationships all over the world right now with people who are really fighting the good fight for customers. I think there's a lot that is going on this year. So it's really cool to have you here on the webinar instead of just being a guest in the chat. That's pretty fun.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. So, you gave such a great quote when I reached out to you about what are the lessons that we've learned in CX from 2020. And I think the thing that stood out in your quote, you had a lot of great points, but one of the things you talked about was VUCA, which is VUCA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I mean, that's a bumper sticker for 2020. I think
Absolutely. I think you're right.
but what I loved about what you said about it was that you pointed to that and said, you know what, this means we have to anticipate for our customers even more. We have to understand what their needs are before they have them. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit and some of the lessons that we learned this year.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeannie. I my background is I have a background in psychology, and I think I've always kept that with me. And as you said, I think 2020 has been absolutely tumultuous for so many people, and VUCA really doesn't personify 2020. And when you think from a psychological viewpoint, I always go back to their Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with it, but basically it's like a pyramid, and everything starts at the bottom where we're always looking for our our most basic needs to be met before we can actually progress up that pyramid where that pinnacle self-actualization lives at the pinnacle. And I think going back to 2020, and we're still in the midst of it now, with all of the uncertainty, all of the VUCA that we have encountered, there have been so many tectonic changes for customers. And considering that, the the job losses, the COVID impact, I think we've been knocked kind of like the snakes and ladders game back down to the basics. And it's so important for us to understand where our patients, I come from a healthcare industry, where our customers have actually landed. It's been a bumpy road, and while some may be holding steady where they were in 2019, many others have encountered really life-changing experiences. So it's important for us, when we're considering what we can do for our customers, to understand where it is that they've landed. Maybe they've been knocked all the way back down to, and most unfortunately, those who may have lost housing, for example, and are now looking for the most basic of needs. So back to that Maslow hierarchy of needs, where are they coming from? Have they been so shaken up that they're, unable to necessarily identify with us and the relationships that we had with them in the sphere that they were in 2019, for example, or 2020 BC, as I call it, before COVID. So it's really important for us to establish where are they coming from so that we can align and meet their needs. So I think that I've come up with an antidote to Vuca. Actually, it's just as you fight fire with fire, I think we can fight Vuca with Vuca. So my my Vuca mirrors that, and I think first it's about. I think the first fee is the viewpoint. So we need to understand what our customer's viewpoint is. Further to all of the changes that we've encountered in 2020. Given that particular viewpoint and how it may have changed, we need to understand where they're coming from. How has that viewpoint impacted, their life, their experiences, and how they might view the services or the products that we may be able to offer. Given that, if we truly understand that, then we can come to a position of compassion. So the C in VUCA. And that to me is a mirror image of empathy, and going back to what you've taught us about certainly understanding the customer journey, and understanding their pain points. We need to feel that in order to be able to the last letter in VUCA, anticipate exactly what it is that they need.
I love that.
So
And I think the thing that, I mean, first of all, you're speaking my language when you talk about empathy and compassion and figuring out really where they're coming from. And I think one of the themes that came out of what you shared through the quote and just now is really collaborating with customers to figure out where they are. And so what are some of the ways that you've done that or that you anticipate doing that in the future?
I think it comes down to good old-fashioned contact and communication. And thank goodness for technology, given all of the confinement that we've been going through this year. But it's so important just to get back to basics with our customers and the stakeholders who matter most to us. And I don't think it's just about asking that perfunctory "How are you?" because we're often so programmed to say we're fine, but we know all too well that many aren't. So I've found that asking some caring but probing questions, very happens. Sorry, it's asking some very caring questions can be very effective. So for example, my go-to would be, understandably, we've all been going through a lot of changes, and we're trying to keep in step with what it is that matters to you and our collaboration with you. So can you tell me at this point, given what we're all contending with in 2020, what really matters to you, given the number of shifts that we've seen? I find that gives us a lot of traction for discussions going forward.
I love the simplicity of that because I think sometimes we overcomplicate how we communicate with customers, we overcomplicate how we gather feedback, and sometimes it is just really checking in. And, the flip side of this is in order to make this work for our customers, we have to really build partnerships throughout our organizations. We have to make sure our leaders are all on board with this. And in fact, Tabitha, who also contributed to the blog, she, recommended a coalition, like building a coalition and how important that is. So I'm just wondering if that's your experience too, and if you have any, thing to add to that.
Absolutely. I think Tabitha's hit on something with coalition. I think one of my favorite words is village. It takes a village, definitely, to support, the people who matter to us most, and obviously that comes down to our customers and stakeholders as well. So I take that very much to heart with respect to the necessity of collaborating. We certainly can't bring value if we don't understand what's needed by others, and we can't do it alone. So
yes, I totally agree. I think there's a phrase I'm going to not get quite right now, but it's basically like together we can go a lot further, right? Like
absolutely, yeah.
if we're trying to build something on our own, we can't get nearly as far as if we have a team of people who are dedicated to it and helping us get there. And customer experience is no different. We just need to recognize that sometimes there are these kind of lone rangers out there in their organizations trying to make big changes. And one of the tools in the toolkit is building a coalition, is really getting that partnership throughout the organization. And, Nancy Port also contributed to our blog. And one of the themes that she talked about was resilience. And her kind of spin on it that I really liked was that it's not necessarily about changing everything, like the strategy might not change, but you have to be resilient and adaptable to change the tactics to live up to that strategy, because the world changed pretty dramatically this year. So I love the idea of resilience. I'm wondering what that means to you.
I really like what Nancy was saying there, and on the topic of strategy, I'm a proponent of the fact that if you've crafted your strategy well, it's it's like a steamship out on the ocean. It's not a speedboat. So your strategy is something that hopefully should be able to weather life's bumps and high waves. So I think that certainly if you've crafted it well, not too much change should be required, but certainly refinements in terms of how you're steering the ship should is probably most appropriate. But on the topic of resilience, I think that's something that whenever I think of resilience, I'm always thinking of analogies, but whenever I think of resilience, I think of pearls. And certainly pearls are born of one tiny grain of sand in an oyster shell, and it's that friction that brings about something so beautiful as a pearl. So certainly thinking about resilience with all of the friction that we've been faced with this year, and the adversities. I think throughout it all, for those of us who are looking for the silver linings, we're finding that the ability to collaborate and the benefits and the joys of the outcomes of collaborating together are in itself bearing a lot of pearls for us as well.
I wish I was wearing my pearls today, because
Yes.
that's a perfect little analogy. Yeah, I love that. And you're so right, because friction is what often leads to great innovation, great ideas, great outcomes for everybody. And sometimes in the moment of that friction, it can be easy to forget that. So that's a really wonderful, optimistic way to look at it. And speaking of optimism, so as we look to 2021, are there any words of wisdom, anything that you see happening that you want to share, and what do you see when you look to the future?
I think in a lot of ways, and I'm coming back to that friction, and I'm throughout all of the turmoil of 2020, and it's not just been COVID. Obviously, we've had uh, a lot of friction. I'll just go back to that. I think it's important for us to just take a step back and look. And I equate all of this VUCA to a forest fire. Fires happen. They're a part of nature. They will level everything, and then out of it, you see these green green signs of life that are coming back. And I think it's nature's way of refreshing. I think a lot of this turmoil, if we do it properly, it's an opportunity for us to just take a step back and look at look for the learnings that we can take going forward. We've had certainly with the onset of technology, we've probably had too much indulgence with a lot of that, and we tend to forget to just get back to the basics of face-to-face interaction, finding out what's important to people on a day-to-day basis, and embracing the technology to help us do that. But I do think that going forward in 2021, I think it was an opportunity for us to just come back to what's important to everyone and reset, recalibrate. Let's recalibrate.
Love that. And I really appreciate look for the learnings, because I think that's something that, one of the things that they say about like very high achievers are they almost evaluate every day, and they look back and think, okay, what did I learn today? Not necessarily from all the great stuff, but from some of the friction points, from some of the things. What are those things that we can learn from and move on and get better and more connected, and all of those things that you just talked about, because that's so important. And I think we're all learning that this year, especially as we crave that connection, right? And
Absolutely.
we're learning that we can adapt, but it's more important than maybe we even thought. So I think that's a great way to look forward about recalibrating and reconnecting and all these wonderful messages. So, Heather, thank you so much for being here. And also, thank you for being part of our community. I think it's really special that we have so many people like you who are out there doing the work, sharing their lessons, getting together, asking questions of each other. It's just a really special environment. And I really appreciate you being a part of that.
Thank you, Janie. It's always a pleasure to participate, and I never come away not having learned something. So, for those of you out there who haven't yet tuned in to Janie's weekly events, please do so. There's a lot in there to unpack.
Thank you so much. That's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here. And here's to a fantastic end of 2020 and a wonderful 2021.
Absolutely. Thank you again.